celebrated his 250th birthday back in February. But two things have transpired. One is he's going to be released, in essence, or the statue will be, from the box that has surrounded him outside Queen's Park for the better part of 5.5 years now. The Ford government's has actually honestly said very little about this, and give Ontario Liberal leader credit, Bonnie Crombie. She said during the election, get him out of there. Let people see him and talk about our first prime minister. And now the Ontario Education Minister, Paul Calandra, on a bit of a roll, credit where credit's due, I think, from some, is stepping in and stopping the Toronto District School Board from renaming a lot of schools in the TDSB, including that of John A. Macdonald as well. So to discuss that as well as what he's built with Integrity TO, we'll get there, is Torontonian Daniel Tate. It's nice to have you in studio.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the school renaming. You were quite adamant, quite outspoken about this, and I think you're looking just to make sure we have the right conversations about people that we consider by today's terms, quote unquote, problematic. But renaming them does nothing but erase their history as opposed to discussing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me, like so many other taxpayers, residents, and citizens of this city, were again aghast at how these politicians and elected people, like the trustees, think they can just unilaterally rename all these names that are so important to our country, to our culture, to the fabric of society, with minimal debate, minimal consultation. And in the TDSB's case, they didn't even consult a historian. It's utterly unbelievable. And so when I saw this and I watched the TDSB debate about this, and they really just rammed it through, that's when I decided to put forth another petition. It got really popular, over 3,000 names, and we just kept getting the message out that this is unacceptable, that these activist TDSB trustees think it's appropriate and in their mandate to just rename schools that are that are named after Canadian pioneers.
Is there a line? Is there somebody you go, well, that name is truly problematic in Canadian history, and you're like, I would step in, and then it becomes about what each person's personal line is. How do you see that?
Well, last I checked, we don't have a Hitler public school. We don't have a Stalin public school. There are levels, okay? There are certain people of history, fascist dictators who obviously murdered tens of millions of people. We
try to avoid those.
Let's avoid those. But to attempt to equate those types of horrible people with Canada's nation builders and pioneers, people like Sir John A. Macdonald, Henry Dundas, who has been vilified and basically undergone character assassination by activists. That's what's happened. That's what they've trying to do. And they're trying to bully us into being ashamed of people like Henry Dundas, who, by the way, was a practical abolitionist. And so when people are trying to lie about history or weaponize history or use revisionism to put forth whatever their sick agenda is, common sense people like you and I and everybody else who I'm sure is listening need to stand up against it and say, no, we're not going to tolerate it. And I think that's what the Minister of Education, Paul Calandra, has finally done.
Is the counter to that, we all get a vote. We all get to vote for school board trustees. It comes across every municipal election. Admittedly, we can debate whether or not we do our proper research on who is what and what they stand for, but it is a democratic principle to vote for your school board trustee, and then if we don't like what they did in those 4 years, we vote them out.
And we certainly intend to do that at the next TDSB trustee election. But we have to remember that the city is still an instrument of the province. The province does have the authority. We voted for the provincial representatives. And if a certain school board is going rogue and not fulfilling their mandate, then the higher authorities have to step in sometimes. And it's too bad they had to. But again, when a school board like the TDSB loses its way and forgets its mandate, which is to provide high quality education in operational buildings, then people like Calandra had to step in.
I haven't seen as much public controversy about school boards as I think we now see. There have been obviously several significant controversies about financial oversight, going too far, political directives. I think we're kidding ourselves if the teachers you had or I had, we couldn't sort of guess or glean a bit of a political lean. One of the big issues, probably you and I are close to the same generation, I'm sure. You look a bit younger than me because I have to get up so early. But South African apartheid would be a great example where our teachers were like, yeah, there's a pretty clear delineation between right and wrong. Where do you see the boards and by that point, the classrooms themselves going, we still have to give teachers some autonomy. We got to give them some wiggle room. We got to give them some rope to tell people what they think about the world around them.
There shouldn't be too much rope. And that's the problem. They've given too much rope, and now there are various teachers who are bringing their own personal politics, global geopolitics, into the classroom, and they're veering off the curriculum. And it's turning into indoctrination. And kids are very, very impressionable. And then you look at that, and then you see people like at City Council, Diane Sachs, who want to lower the voting age to 16 nationally. So you look at these things and you're like, something here doesn't pass the smell test. You have a Toronto District School Board, teachers in classrooms that are veering off into ideological warfare. You have a city council, Diane Sachs, who are voting to lower the voting age to 16. Leave the kids alone. That's the message. That's why I put forth the petition. And again, the Minister of Education, Calandra, sees that as well, as do so many other parents.
I'll give you a sense just to get us. I know Ben Mulroney's going to talk about it after 9, but I want to play this clip from Olivia Chow. She opened up Pride festivities in the city yesterday for the month. Obviously, Toronto's, I think, still has North America's biggest Pride parade. But she talked about some of the funding withdrawals across the city. Here's what she said to a crowd. And she's definitely playing to the crowd with this one. Here it is.
Google and what? Okay, we won't even. Home Depot. I know. I hate telling them. Yeah, don't shop at Home Depot, guys. Rona. Okay. Yeah. There are other choices. Anyway, shop Canadian, shop local. No. Yeah. Yes. We are not the 51st state. Are you kidding? We are proud Torontonians, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so as you can tell, it was well organized. First of all, there's my. When I don't know if it's the duty of a mayor, and you're watching this really closely at Integrity TO, looking at what councillors are doing, and certainly what the mayor is saying, it sets a tone for the city. Should the mayor be telling people where to shop?
Well, first off, she seemed barely coherent there.
That's one interpretation.
I couldn't even really understand much of what she's saying. The other thing is her chief advisor needs to tell her to stop talking to Torontonians like we're 5 years old.
I think that's not going to happen.
Well,
but
we're not in kindergarten. Talk to us like adults. Secondly, yeah, you shouldn't be telling us where we can or cannot shop. But she's all this. She's drinking this elbows up Kool-Aid. You got her deputy mayor Mike Cole, who's posting pictures on Instagram with made in Canada flags that were, Canadian flags that were made in China. Like they've lost the plot, all of them. And Mayor Chow should not again be telling us where or where not to shop. I'll go shop at Home Depot if I want.
It's a more big picture question, but there's clearly energy behind what you've built with integrityto.ca to swap out the mayor and a lot of members of council. Why do you care so much? Why do you think it matters so much to do so next election?
Yeah, because under this current administration at City Council and under Mayor Chow, this city is declining at an exponential rate. And everybody I talk to and everybody who sees me on the street and everything I see at City Hall myself when I go attend meetings confirms and verifies that. And so there's a lack of leadership. There's no moral clarity with our leadership. Mayor Chow and her crew have the balance of power, and they're making terrible policy and hurting our city. And a lot of people see that, like sort of the silent majority, if you will, see that. And I'm just trying to take the feeling of the silent majority and make it more vocal.
How much do you look and say the apathy? I mean, clearly when not even 40% of people come out and vote in municipal elections, we talk about school boards, even less people get to know who their school board trustee is. How do you fix that?
It starts with awareness. I think right now there's such a palpable degree of disillusionment across the city with average citizens that the first thing is to just wake up. Like we were in a COVID slumber for many years. There was an election. That election had such low voter turnout. There was just such a high degree of apathy, and really we're paying the price for it now. But hey, we can wake up now. We know there's going to be an election in 513 days or so.
Who's counting?
And who's counting? and now's the time to sort of jolt the electorate into waking up. And it's like, everyone's pissed off. The renaming of Dundas Square was a big catalyst moment. That woke up a lot of
but
people.
Obviously a lot of councillors aren't worried about going and knocking on doors in a year and a half and someone saying, my biggest issue was what became Sankofa Square. I'm not going to vote for you. Clearly, a lot of councillors aren't worried about that.
Well, that's up to them. They should be worried. If I were them, I'd be very, very worried.
Daniel, thanks for coming in.
Thanks a lot, Greg.
There's Daniel Tate, integrityto.ca. He's the executive director of that organization.